Welcome to the Alcott Stories channel. We're so glad you're here with us today, ready to immerse yourself in a deeply emotional journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. In this story, we follow Daniel Pierce, a young and successful CEO who, despite having it all, loses the most important thing, his heart. The story unfolds as Daniel's world shatters due to a misunderstanding, and he's left fighting for a second chance at love with Ava, the woman he betrayed. As you watch, we invite you to reflect on this question. Can love truly be rebuilt after it has been destroyed? Can forgiveness bridge the gap between broken hearts, or is it too late for redemption? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share your views on whether second chances are possible after betrayal, and let's discuss the powerful impact of trust in relationships. If you found yourself moved by this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. By joining us, you're not just subscribing to a channel, you're becoming a part of a community that values the beauty of love, the strength in vulnerability, and the power of second chances. Every subscription means the world to us, and it helps us bring more heartfelt, emotional stories that inspire and touch your soul. Thank you for being here, and we hope you'll stay with us for more journeys of the heart. Daniel Pierce had everything: a vast empire, unimaginable wealth, and the kind of power most men could only dream of. Yet despite the luxury surrounding him, his soul was starving. His penthouse, with its panoramic city views, felt more like a gilded cage than a home. Each morning, he awoke to the same routine: cold, calculated meetings, a flurry of decisions that made others richer but left him feeling poorer in ways he couldn't define. His days were spent drowning in reports, his nights echoing with the silence of an empty heart. But fate, unpredictable as ever, had plans to shake his world. It started with a scent, bold, rich, and warm, the kind of coffee that promised comfort. He had walked past the small cafe in the lobby of his skyscraper countless times, never sparing it a second glance. It was an insignificant place in his grand empire, and yet that morning something pulled him in. And then he saw her. Ava Johnson. She wasn't just another barista, she was a vision. Deep brown eyes, warm and endless, filled with a kindness that unsettled him, a smile that held secrets, a light that made the world around her seem brighter. Her skin, rich like mahogany, glowed under the cafe's golden lights. There was something about her, something effortless, something real. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you?" Her voice was smooth, like jazz on a rainy night. Daniel was accustomed to a certain reaction from people, either admiration for his status or intimidation of his power. But this woman looked at him as if he were just another man in need of coffee. "Black coffee," he said, surprised by his own hesitation. Ava moved with an unhurried grace, preparing his order. "You look like someone who needs more than just caffeine." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me." She glanced up, her eyes filled with amusement. "You've been sighing every few seconds, checking your phone like it owes you an apology. Trust me, I know an exhausted soul when I see one." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Daniel laughed. Not the polished chuckle he used at corporate dinners, but a real, unexpected laugh. "You're observant," he admitted, intrigued. She shrugged. "People watching is part of the job." Sliding his coffee across the counter, she added, "First cup is on the house. Call it a welcome to the world outside your boardroom." Daniel stared at the cup in his hands. It wasn't about the free coffee. It was the way she spoke, the way she made him feel seen. He left the cafe that morning with more than just caffeine. He left with her voice in his head, her smile haunting him in the best way. And the next day, he returned. Then the next. At first, he told himself it was the coffee. Then he admitted it was the company. Their conversations were unlike anything he was used to. She didn't talk about mergers or market trends. She spoke of dreams, of books, of the beauty in small, ordinary moments. She wasn't impressed by his wealth or reputation. She challenged him, made him question, made him feel. And for the first time in years, Daniel Pierce felt alive. Despite the chasm between their worlds, love found its way. Daniel admired Ava's strength, her refusal to be defined by anyone but herself. She was a woman who stood firm in who she was, unshaken by society's expectations. And Ava, in turn, saw in Daniel a man yearning for something deeper than boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. She saw beyond his wealth, beyond the power he wielded, to the soul beneath it all, the man who longed for love, for something pure and real. Their love was not one of extravagant displays or grandiose declarations. It was built in quiet moments, the way he lingered in her cafe just to hear her voice, the way she memorized exactly how he liked his coffee, the stolen glances, the shared laughter over something only they understood. It was in the warmth of her touch, in the way his heart steadied when she was near. Daniel had never imagined himself falling for someone so far removed from his world. Yet, with Ava, he found peace in the simplicity of love. She didn't want his money, his power. She only wanted him. Against all odds, against the whispers of disapproval from the high society Daniel was entangled in, he made a choice. Love was not about social status or expectations. It was about the undeniable connection they shared. One evening, under the glow of soft string lights in Ava's modest little cafe, Daniel took her hands in his gaze steady, unwavering. "Marry me," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "not because I can give you the world, but because you are my world." Tears welled in Ava's eyes, not because of the proposal, but because she saw sincerity in his every word. She had always believed love should be real, not transactional. And with Daniel, she had found something worth holding on to. With a tearful smile, she whispered, "Yes." Their wedding was not the grand affair many expected from a man like Daniel Pierce. There were no gilded invitations sent to elites, no extravagant receptions in ballrooms lined with crystal chandeliers. Instead, it was intimate, raw, and filled with something money could never buy: pure, unfiltered love. Ava walked down the aisle with nothing but joy radiating from her heart, Daniel waiting for her with eyes that held an unspoken vow. He would cherish her, honor her, never let her go. And as they exchanged vows, hand in hand, they knew they had chosen love over expectation, truth over illusion. What they didn't know was that life had more tests in store for them, and love, no matter how strong, would soon be put through the fire. The day Ava moved into Daniel's mansion, it no longer felt like just a house. It became something else entirely. For years, the massive estate had been nothing more than a showpiece of wealth: cold marble floors, towering glass windows, and designer furniture chosen more for its price tag than comfort. It was breathtaking, yes, but lifeless. The kind of place that screamed power but whispered loneliness. Then came Ava. She arrived not with expensive tastes or demands, but with warmth, an energy that breathed life into every hollow space. She replaced the empty silences with music, her soft humming filling the halls as she moved about. She decorated the sleek but soulless rooms with small touches: a scented candle on the bedside table, a throw blanket draped over the leather couch, fresh flowers in the kitchen, and most of all, she filled the mansion with love. Daniel had never known what it meant to come home and truly feel at peace. But with Ava, it was different. He'd returned from a grueling day at the office, his head pounding from board meetings and financial reports, only to find her curled up on the couch, a book in hand, waiting for him. She'd smile, pat the space beside her, and without a word, all the stress in his body would melt away. Nights were no longer spent in the silence of his own thoughts. Instead, They were filled with whispered conversations in bed, laughter over shared meals, stolen kisses in the kitchen as she playfully swatted him away from tasting the food before it was done. She refused to let his wealth define her. Despite marrying one of the richest men in the country, Ava kept her cafe running. She woke up before dawn, kissed him on the cheek, and went to work like any other day. She didn't want maids waiting on her hand and foot. She didn't want a life of excess. She wanted her independence, her dreams, her passion, and Daniel admired her all the more for it. In many ways, they were opposites. He, a man who had spent his life chasing wealth, and she, a woman who found joy in the simplest of things. But that was what made their love so powerful. It was raw, unfiltered, real, or so they thought, because love alone is never enough. The shadows of Daniel's world lurked in the corners, waiting. It started small, barely noticeable at first. A lingering glance from his employees when Ava visited him at work. A hushed whisper between board members, cut off the moment he entered the room. A slow, creeping tension that neither of them acknowledged. Daniel ignored it. Ava brushed it off. But the world they lived in was not so easily conquered by love. There were those who did not approve, those who saw Ava not as his wife, but as an intruder, an outsider in a space where she didn't belong. And as much as they tried to drown out the noise, the cracks had already begun to form, cracks that would soon shatter everything. Love is strong, but doubt is a slow poison, silent, creeping, and deadly. At first, Daniel brushed off the rumors. They were ridiculous, baseless, beneath his concern. Ava was his wife, his heart, the woman who had brought light into his world of cold ambition. He had never met anyone as honest, as genuine. How could he, of all people, question her? But doubt does not come crashing like a storm. It seeps in like a slow leak, barely noticeable until the foundation begins to rot. It started with a casual remark from his CFO. "Your wife has quite the social circle," the man had said, sipping his whiskey during an office gala. "Saw her the other night, laughing with some guy outside the cafe. Seemed close." Daniel had chuckled at the absurdity of it. Ava had always been friendly, warm. That was who she was. It meant nothing. But then there were more whispers. "She's been meeting him often," someone muttered as he passed by. "They looked intimate," another voice chimed. "It's always late at night." The words crawled into his mind like parasites, feeding on his own insecurities. He knew his world. He had built an empire on understanding people's motives, on calculating risk, on never trusting blindly. But this was Ava. Still, he found himself watching her more closely, noticing the way she'd smile at her phone when a message came in, the night she came home a little later than usual, the way she didn't immediately tell him where she had been. It was ridiculous. He knew that. And yet, the whispers gnawed at him. One night he arrived home earlier than usual. Ava wasn't there. He checked his watch. 9:45 p.m. His gut twisted. He pulled out his phone, hesitated, then finally called her. It rang twice before she answered, slightly breathless. "Hey, love," she said. "I was just about to... Where are you?" His voice was calm, too calm. A pause. Then, "Still at the cafe." "I had some things to finish up." A lie. The words tasted bitter before he could stop them. But why would she lie? The whispers of others became his own thoughts. Daniel sat in his dimly lit office that night, staring at the city skyline, the poison of doubt fully coursing through his veins. Ava, the woman he loved more than life itself. Was she betraying him? His fists clenched. Number. He couldn't be a fool. He needed to know the truth, even if it shattered him. Betrayed by his own heart, expanded. The night was thick with tension, the kind that hangs in the air like a storm waiting to break. Daniel's heart was pounding, not with love, but with a fierce, consuming anger. The darkness outside mirrored the tempest inside him. He had seen the pictures, the whispered rumors, the way Ava had been laughing with another man, her smile warm and innocent, but to him it was an undeniable betrayal. He stood there, in the doorway of their living room, fists clenched at his sides, his breath coming fast. Ava was sitting on the couch, her eyes wide, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of her coffee cup. The man he had once adored, the man who had held her close in the quiet moments of their life together, was now a stranger. The man he had loved was vanishing, replaced by this person he didn't recognize. "Tell me the truth, who is he?" His voice was cold, foreign to his own ears. He couldn't recognize the man speaking. This wasn't the Daniel who had swept her off her feet, the one who had promised to never hurt her. This was the man the rumors had created, the broken, jealous, hollow version of himself. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, as if trying to make sense of the stranger before her. "What? Daniel, no!" His gaze was intense, burning with an accusation he couldn't shake. "I've seen the pictures, the rumors. Stop lying." Ava stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the space between them stretching further, like an insurmountable chasm. How had they gotten here? How had the love they shared come to this? She wiped away a stray tear that had fallen, but it was no use. The damage was done. "Daniel, please. It's not what you think. That man is a friend. I was helping him through a rough time." But Daniel's mind was clouded. The whispers in the halls of Pierce Enterprises, the late-night conversations she'd had with that man, everything had spiraled into doubt. He couldn't hear her. The warmth in her voice, the sincerity in her eyes, it was lost on him. His jealousy wrapped around his heart like a vice, suffocating everything else. "Ava." His voice cracked, but his pride refused to let him back down. I can't do this. I want a divorce." Her body froze. The words struck her like a physical blow, a thunderclap that shattered the silence. Ava's world stopped spinning for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. Tears filled her eyes, blurring her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. She couldn't, because the man she had loved, the man she had given her heart to, was standing there, turning his back on her, blind to the truth. "I want a divorce," he repeated, his voice steady, but inside he was crumbling. Every part of him screamed at him to turn back, to listen, to understand, but pride and fear won out. It was too late now. Ava's sobs filled the emptiness between them, each one a reminder of the love they had lost, the life they had built together. She wanted to scream, to make him understand, but her voice betrayed her. "Daniel, please," she whispered, but he didn't turn back. His back was a wall she couldn't breach. She walked away, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the hollow space they had once shared. The house that had been filled with laughter, warmth and promise now felt like a mausoleum. She left him there, standing amidst the wreckage of his own jealousy, while her heart shattered. The memories, their first kiss, the late-night talks, the plans for their future, all of it crumbled beneath the weight of a lie. As the door clicked shut behind her, Daniel stood motionless. The silence that followed was deafening. He wanted to run after her, to beg for forgiveness, to take back the words that had shattered everything. But it was too late. Ava was gone. And all he had left was a broken version of the man he used to be. A man who had destroyed the best thing he'd ever had. As the night stretched on, Daniel sat in the dark, consumed by guilt and regret. But the truth was, it was never too late to turn back. He just didn't know it yet. Daniel thought he had won. After all, he had freed himself from the woman he believed had betrayed him, from the life that had been filled with doubt and uncertainty. The weight of Ava's departure, the betrayal he thought she had committed, had clouded his judgment, but in the end, he thought the divorce was the right choice. He'd rid himself of the lies, or so he believed. The wedding to Olivia Reed came as a logical step, a way to rebuild, to create the illusion of normalcy. Olivia was everything the world expected from a woman of Daniel's stature, polished, poised, the perfect arm candy. She was the daughter of a powerful family, a woman who fit neatly into his image of success. The world watched as they exchanged vows, their wedding a spectacle of wealth and grandeur, with champagne flowing and photographers snapping every moment. It was the kind of marriage the tabloids would write about, the kind that earned approval, admiration, and envy, but in the hollow corners of Daniel's heart, something gnawed at him. He couldn't place it at first. Olivia was beautiful, intelligent, and well-educated. She never questioned his decisions, never challenged him, and never made him feel anything other than the power he wielded. She was everything he should have wanted. She was everything the world wanted for him. But she wasn't Ava. Olivia's laughter didn't warm the house like Ava's had. Her touch didn't spark the electric connection that had once coursed between Daniel and Ava. In the quiet of their vast, empty mansion, Daniel could feel the absence of Ava, her laughter still echoing in his mind, like a ghost haunting the walls. The mansion, which had once been a place of warmth, now stood as a museum to what he had lost. The furniture, arranged perfectly, felt more like exhibits in a cold, lifeless gallery than the spaces where a life had once been lived. The grand chandelier above the dining table flickered dimly, as though it too mourned the absence of love. The windows, once wide open to the world, now felt closed, shut off from the light. He would wake up in the morning to find Olivia beside him, but his thoughts would immediately drift back to Ava. Every time he passed the kitchen, he imagined her there, brewing coffee with a smile that made everything feel right. He saw her at the cafe they had once shared, poring over books, talking about dreams that didn't need millions of dollars to come true. He didn't dare speak of it to Olivia. She was a perfect wife in every way, except that she was not Ava. And every time they shared a meal, every time they attended an event together, Daniel could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on him. In the evenings, when the world was still, Daniel would wander through the mansion, his mind lost in memories of what used to be. The house was beautiful, filled with elegance and charm, but it had none of the soul it had once had. It had been a home, a place where love lived, not a showpiece for his achievements. The grand piano in the corner of the living room stood untouched. Ava used to play it sometimes, her fingers dancing across the keys, the soft melody filling the room, as Daniel would sit nearby, mesmerized by the sound of her music, of her heart. But now the piano remained silent, a symbol of all the joy and warmth that had once filled these rooms. One evening, Daniel stood before the fireplace, watching the flames flicker, but his mind was far from the present. He could see Ava's face, her bright eyes filled with life, her voice always so genuine, so full of love. The love he thought he had lost forever. Olivia walked into the room, breaking his reverie, her voice soft and measured. "Daniel, are you okay?" He turned, forcing a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine. Just thinking. Thinking about the woman he had driven away, thinking about the mistakes he had made, thinking about how, no matter how much he tried to fill the emptiness with Olivia, with his success, with all the things the world told him he needed, nothing could replace what he had lost. "I'm going to bed," Olivia said, her voice laced with concern. But Daniel didn't respond. He simply watched her leave, feeling the distance between them grow even wider. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding. She was the perfect wife, the woman who had stood beside him when the world expected her to. But all he could see was the hollow space left by Ava. That night, Daniel lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was still, but his mind raced. He had the life the world envied, Wealth, power, status, but it meant nothing. It felt like a mask, a performance for the world to see. He had chosen security over love, and now the emptiness he had once ignored had swallowed him whole. And as the darkness stretched on, Daniel knew the painful truth. He had won the battle, but in doing so, he had lost everything that truly mattered. Ava stood at the threshold of a new beginning, the small town in front of her offering a fresh start, a place where no one knew her name, and no one knew the story that had broken her heart. She had left behind the lavish mansion, the life she once knew, to forge something new, something that was hers alone. The cafe she had dreamed of was now a reality, built with her own hands, brick by brick from the ground up. Her muscles ached from the labor of it all, but there was a fire inside her that refused to let her stop. She couldn't afford to dwell on the past, not when there was so much to rebuild. Each morning she woke before the sun, her hands working tirelessly to craft the perfect cup of coffee, the one that would make someone's day better, the one that would make her feel alive again. The town embraced her in ways she hadn't expected. The locals became her new family, their smiles warm and genuine. The small cafe, with its cozy corners and aroma of freshly ground beans, quickly became a gathering place. Ava's strength, her unshakable resilience, was something they admired. She was no longer the woman who had been left broken and betrayed. She was a woman who had risen from the ashes, someone they could look up to. But no matter how much the town had welcomed her, no matter how hard she worked to create a life that was hers, there were still nights when the silence felt suffocating. After the last customer had left, after the lights were dimmed and the doors locked, Ava would sit by herself, lost in thought. The laughter of the townspeople, the sound of the coffee machine whirring, the clinking of mugs, it would fade into the background, leaving her with the quiet hum of her own memories. And in those moments, when the world was still, the ghost of Daniel's love would creep back into her heart. She could still feel the warmth of his touch, the tenderness of his voice, the way he had made her feel like she was everything. She remembered how they had shared dreams together, the plans they had made, and the way he had once looked at her as if she was the center of his world. She remembered their love, pure, unbroken before the world had come crashing down. And in the stillness of the night, those memories would wrap around her, a bittersweet reminder of the love that had once been, the love that had been shattered by lies and mistrust. But Ava refused to let those memories define her. She couldn't. She had fought too hard to get where she was now. The hurt, the betrayal, the way Daniel had turned his back on her, those were things she could not change. But she could choose how to move forward. She could choose to let her heart heal, to turn the pain into strength. So, she kept going. Every morning, she woke up with purpose. Every cup of coffee she brewed, every conversation she had, every smile she shared with a customer, she poured herself into it. She found joy in the little things, in the way the town rallied around her, in the way she had built something from nothing. She wasn't the woman who had been abandoned. She was Ava Johnson, a woman who had found her own way, who had discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed. But even as she embraced her new life, even as she found solace in the community she had built, there were still moments when the silence became unbearable. When the stars glittered in the night sky, when the world was asleep and everything felt peaceful, she would allow herself to remember him. She remembered the way Daniel's hands had held hers, the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her. She remembered the way they had laughed together, the way they had dreamed of a future filled with endless possibilities. She remembered the love they had shared, and for a fleeting moment, she let herself wish that things had been different. But then, as the silence stretched on and the cool night air settled around her, she would close her eyes and remind herself that she had walked away for a reason. Daniel had betrayed her. He had chosen doubt over trust, fear over love. And no matter how much her heart still longed for him in the quiet moments, she knew she couldn't go back to that pain. She had found something better, a life built on her own terms, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was, not for the woman she had been in someone else's eyes. In the quiet of the night, as the stars twinkled above and the wind whispered through the trees, Ava whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would move forward, always forward. She would never let the ghost of Daniel's love hold her back again. She had found her own strength. She had found her own peace. Years passed, and life for Daniel had unfolded in a blur of fleeting triumphs and hollow victories. His empire continued to grow. His name still carried weight, his wealth only expanding. He had it all, the mansions, the cars, the status. But deep inside, a quiet ache lingered, growing steadily with each passing year. The void that Ava had left in his life had never been filled. No matter how many awards or accolades he received, none of them could erase the ghost of her love. None of them could quiet the regret that had taken root in his heart. Daniel had moved on, or so he told himself. He had married Olivia, a woman who had fit perfectly into his world, beautiful, composed, and of the same status. Their life together was everything society expected of him. But beneath the polished surface, Daniel knew the truth. His heart had never belonged to Olivia. His heart still ached for Ava. He had tried to ignore it, to bury it under layers of success and wealth, but nothing could silence the gnawing emptiness that followed him like a shadow. One day, a seemingly insignificant conversation at a board meeting changed everything. A colleague, one who had known Daniel for years, casually mentioned something that caught his attention. "You know, I heard that Ava's cafe is doing really well these days," they said, almost as if it were an afterthought. "She's a great businesswoman, and I heard she's been helping out some of the local families too." For some reason, this comment pierced through the fog of Daniel's mind. Avenue. She was still out there, thriving, living a life he had once hoped to share with her. But as the words lingered in his ears, something else came to light, something he had long forgotten. It was the memories, the rumors that had once consumed him. He remembered the night he had confronted her, the accusations, the harsh words he had spoken. He had believed the lies, the whispers, the photographs that had been shown to him. The man Ava had been seen with, the one Daniel had accused her of betraying him with, was a childhood friend, someone who had fallen into a dark place, someone Ava had been helping through his depression. She hadn't betrayed him. She had been there for a friend, offering the compassion and care that had always been a part of her heart. The truth crashed into him like a tidal wave, drowning him in guilt and sorrow. The realization that he had driven away the only woman who had ever truly understood him, the one who had seen past his wealth and status to the man he had once been, was a bitter pill to swallow. All those years of regret, all those sleepless nights, the constant yearning for something he couldn't grasp, it had all been for nothing. He had lost her, not because of her actions, but because of his own insecurities, his own failures. The weight of the truth suffocated him, and Daniel sank deeper into his own self-loathing. The life he had chosen after Ava, the marriage to Olivia, the facade of a perfect life, suddenly felt like a prison. He had done everything society expected of him, but none of it had brought him happiness. He had the world at his feet, yet without Ava, it meant nothing. At night, Daniel would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have been. He thought of the love they had shared, of how it had felt to be with someone who truly saw him, someone who loved him without any expectation or agenda. He thought of her smile, her laughter, the way she had always made him feel like he was enough. And then, in the quiet darkness, the guilt would crush him, relentless and unforgiving. He had destroyed the best thing he had ever had, and now he was left with nothing but the ruins of a life he could never rebuild. Olivia, once the woman he had thought was the perfect partner, had slowly faded into the background of his life. Their marriage, which had once seemed like the perfect solution to his pain, had now become a hollow shell. There was no passion between them, no connection. It was a marriage of convenience, a partnership based on appearances, nothing more. And deep down, Daniel knew it. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it, surrounded by the emptiness he had created. Olivia had seen the change in him, the way he no longer smiled the way he used to, the way he no longer cared about the things he once did. She could sense the distance between them, even if she didn't fully understand the cause. One evening, after yet another failed attempt at conversation, she finally spoke the truth that had been hovering between them for years. "Daniel, we're both just going through the motions here," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "This isn't love. It's not even a partnership. We're just existing together." Daniel didn't respond. What was there to say? She was right. She had always been right. He had never loved her. He had never loved anyone the way he had loved Ava. And now he had lost her forever. With the crushing weight of the truth on his shoulders, Daniel realized the depth of his loss. He had everything the world told him he should want, but without Ava, he had nothing. The empire, the wealth, the status, all of it felt meaningless now. He would have traded it all, every last penny, for one more chance to hold her, to tell her that he had been wrong, to beg for her forgiveness. But it was too late. She had moved on. She had built a life without him, and no amount of regret or longing could ever change that. In the end, Daniel was left with only one truth. He had destroyed his own happiness, and now he was forced to live with the consequences. The years had been cruel to Daniel Pierce. Once a towering figure, a billionaire who commanded rooms with his presence, now he was a shell of that man. Divorced, broken and consumed by regret, Daniel wandered through life with nothing but the hollow echo of his past mistakes. His empire, once his pride, felt like nothing more than a gilded cage. Success had never been enough to fill the emptiness that had taken root in his heart. Ava, the woman he had lost to his own foolishness, was the one thing he could never replace, never forget. After months of searching, it was the faintest whisper of hope that finally guided him to the small town where she had started over. The news had traveled slowly, a whisper in the wind. Ava had opened a cafe. Not just any cafe, but a place where people gathered, where lives were shared over coffee and conversation, where warmth poured not only from the cups, but from the very soul of the woman who ran it. Daniel didn't know what he expected. He had imagined her moving on, finding peace, finding happiness without him. Yet he still couldn't help the way his heart quickened when he saw the familiar name on the sign above the door. Ava's Cafe. It felt surreal, like a dream he had been chasing for far too long. Standing outside the door, Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. He hadn't anticipated this moment to be so real, so raw. His hands trembled, the weight of the years and the mistakes pressing down on him with a suffocating intensity. He had spent so long chasing after wealth, after success, thinking that if he conquered the world, he would fill the void. But standing here, at the threshold of the one thing that had always mattered, Ava, her forgiveness, her love, he realized that nothing he had ever built could undo the damage he had caused. He pushed the door open, and the bell above the door chimed softly, a gentle sound that echoed like a heartbeat in the quiet of the room. Ava was behind the counter, her back to him as she worked. But when she heard the door, she turned, and in that instant, everything stopped. Time itself seemed to freeze. There she was, standing before him, stronger than before, her beauty still as radiant as he remembered. But there was something different in her eyes, a sadness, a weariness that had been etched into her soul, a shadow that hadn't been there when they had first met. Her gaze met his, and for a moment there was nothing but silence between them. It was as if the years, the distance, the heartbreak hadn't happened at all. It was just the two of them, caught in the same painful moment. Ava didn't move. She didn't say anything at first, just studied him, her eyes guarded. She had built walls around her heart, walls that he had no right to tear down. She had loved him with everything she had, only to watch him destroy their love with suspicion and jealousy. How could she let him in again? How could she let him break her heart all over again? But Daniel wasn't the man he had been before. Gone was the arrogant billionaire, the man who had thought his wealth and power could solve everything. In front of her stood a man stripped bare, his ego shattered, his pride broken. He had nothing left but the raw honesty of his regret. "Ava," his voice cracked, the words coming out in a whisper, as if he was afraid they would disappear the moment they left his lips. He had practiced this, rehearsed it in his mind for years, but nothing could have prepared him for the weight of saying it to her face. "I was wrong." The pain in her eyes flared, and her lips tightened. She didn't speak, but her silence said everything. She didn't need to hear apologies. She didn't need to hear him say he was sorry. What she needed, what she had always needed, was for him to see her, to understand her, to love her. "You destroyed me, Daniel," she finally said, her voice steady but laced with the emotion she had held back for so long. Her words cut through him, sharper than any accusation. She had loved him, truly loved him, and he had shattered her with his blind jealousy. "You took everything from me, my trust, my heart. You destroyed us." Daniel's chest tightened. Every word she spoke felt like a dagger, but it was a truth he had to face. He had taken everything from her, and now all he could do was stand here, vulnerable, broken, and ask for forgiveness. "I know," he whispered, his voice thick with regret. "I don't expect you to take me back. I don't even deserve it." His heart ached as the words left him. He wasn't asking for a second chance, not yet, not in that moment. What he needed from her now was the truth, the honesty that he had failed to see before. "I just need you to know I never stopped loving you." The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Ava's eyes searched his, and for the first time in years, she saw something real in him. Not the man who had destroyed her, not the man who had let doubt and suspicion cloud his judgment, but the man who was now asking, pleading even, for a chance at redemption, a man who had been broken by his own mistakes and was finally willing to own them. She didn't say anything at first. Her heart was guarded, the scars still fresh. But as she looked at him, something inside her softened. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the depth of his remorse. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had truly changed. Ava stepped closer, the years between them narrowing in the space of a single breath. She didn't offer him forgiveness yet, but she didn't turn away either. The road to redemption wasn't easy and it wasn't guaranteed. But in that moment, for the first time in years, they were standing on the same ground again. Two people who had once loved each other, and now, with the weight of their past behind them, could find a way to move forward, step by painful step. "I can't promise you anything, Daniel," she said softly, her voice no longer laced with bitterness, but with the weight of everything they had been through. "But I'll listen. I'll listen to what you have to say." And for Daniel, that was all he needed. A chance. A chance to prove that love, even when tested and broken, could still rise again, stronger than before. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel Pierce's transformation wasn't just about words. It was about the quiet, unwavering dedication to proving his worth. Gone was the billionaire who had once seen the world as something to conquer. In his place stood a man who had lost everything and was now determined to rebuild, not his empire, but his heart, his honor, and his relationship with the woman who had once been his everything. Daniel worked in Ava's cafe, not just as a form of penance, but as a way to show her through every small action that he had changed. He learned the names of every regular customer, listened attentively to their stories, and poured his heart into making every cup of coffee just right. He was no longer the man who saw people as tools to his success. He was the man who understood the power of human connection, the simple beauty of a smile, and the comfort of a warm drink shared between friends. Ava watched him, the man she had once loved and then lost, humbled and honest in ways she never expected. It wasn't just his actions, it was the way he was. The way he carried himself now, stripped of arrogance and entitlement, showed her the man he could have been all along. But she couldn't forget the pain. She couldn't forget how her trust had been shattered, how the person she had given her heart to had turned away from her, blinded by jealousy and insecurities. But as the days passed, something in her began to shift. She saw the man who was working tirelessly to make things right, not out of obligation, but out of a deep, aching need to repair the damage he had caused. His sincerity shone through every gesture. There was no rush for reconciliation, no expectation of her forgiveness. He wasn't begging. He was simply showing up day after day, a silent testament to his commitment. She began to let her walls down, not because she was ready to forgive him completely, but because she could see, beneath the scars of their past, the love they had once shared. That love, it seemed, was still there, flickering like a small flame, but burning brighter with each passing day. One evening, as the golden hues of the sunset cast long shadows across the cafe, Daniel stood behind the counter, his hands busy with the closing duties, his mind elsewhere. Ava was clearing the last of the tables when their eyes met. There was a quiet tension in the air, a moment of unspoken understanding. The world outside seemed to fade, and all that mattered was the two of them, standing in the quiet of the cafe they had both worked so hard to create. Ava took a deep breath, her heart racing, and in that moment, she knew what she needed to say. It wasn't just about forgiveness, it was about healing, about letting go of the pain that had kept her tethered to the past. And so, with a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke the words that had been stuck in her throat for so long. "I forgive you." The weight of those words hung in the air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Daniel felt the burden on his chest begin to lift. His breath caught in his throat, and he stood there for a moment, unable to speak, overwhelmed by the enormity of the gift she had just given him. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them away. He didn't need to hide anymore. He had spent so many years hiding behind wealth and pride, but in front of Ava there was no need for masks. He reached out for her hand, and when she didn't pull away, he gently pressed it to his chest. "I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. It wasn't a promise he made lightly. It wasn't just a way to win her back. It was a vow, a deep commitment to be the man she deserved, not the man he had been. Ava looked at him, her heart torn between the love she had never stopped feeling and the pain of the past. She had watched him make mistake after mistake, but in his eyes now she saw something different, something real. The man before her wasn't the arrogant billionaire who had turned his back on her, but a man who had been through hell and come out the other side, stronger and wiser. For the first time, she saw a future with him, not one built on the fragile foundation of wealth or status, but on trust, on love, and on the understanding that their love story had been tested and had survived. It had been broken, yes, but it had been rebuilt stronger than before. And so, when Daniel finally asked her to marry him again, it wasn't just an invitation to relive the past. It was an invitation to create something new, something lasting. This time, their love wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a love forged in the fire of mistakes and forgiveness, a love that had been tested and had come out on the other side, scarred but stronger. Their second wedding wasn't a grand affair. It wasn't about the extravagance that their first wedding had promised. This time, it was intimate, personal, and full of meaning. There were no lavish decorations, no public displays of wealth. There was just them, two souls who had loved and lost and found their way back to each other. As they stood together, exchanging vows once again, Daniel's heart swelled with gratitude. He had everything he had ever wanted in that moment, not because of his success or his wealth, but because he had earned the love of the woman he had once taken for granted, and this time he would never take her for granted again. "I love you," he whispered, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I always have." And Ava, her heart full of both love and hope, whispered back, "I love you too." And just like that, their love story wasn't just a story of redemption. It was a story of trust rebuilt, of hearts mended, and of two people who had found their way back home together. Trust is the heartbeat of love. In the absence of trust, love falters, and doubt and fear take root, weakening even the strongest of bonds. But when love is tested, when the lies and misunderstandings are stripped away, it has the power to rise from the ashes. What was once broken can be rebuilt stronger, and what was lost can be found again, shining brighter than before. True love is not perfect. It is resilient, capable of healing and growth. It is not about avoiding mistakes, but learning from them, building a foundation of trust that cannot be easily shaken. Love, when nurtured with sincerity and patience, will always find its way back, proving that even the deepest wounds can be healed with time and unwavering commitment. In a world where success is measured by wealth, status, and appearances, we often forget the true value of love and trust. This story of Daniel and Ava is a reminder that no amount of money can fill the emptiness left when love is lost. It's easy to chase after the illusion of perfection, climbing the ladder of success, collecting accolades, and adorning ourselves with titles that make us feel important. But in the end, it's not the material things that bring us happiness, but the connections we build with others, the trust we share, and the love that binds us. Daniel's journey is one that many of us can relate to in some way. We've all made mistakes. We've all been blinded by our own insecurities and fears. We've all, at one point, failed to see the people who loved us the most for who they truly were. Instead, we let our doubts, our ego, and our pride cloud our judgment. And in that moment of weakness, we lose what matters most. Daniel thought he could have everything. He had wealth, power, and control over every aspect of his life. But despite all of his success, he was hollow inside. He had no one to turn to, no one who truly saw him, who loved him for who he was. Their trust is the foundation of any relationship, and once that trust is broken, it can take everything to rebuild. But it is possible. Let us all remember that love is not about perfection. It's about forgiveness, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. It's about being real with each other, even when it's hard. So if you're holding on to a past mistake or a broken heart, take a moment to reflect. Maybe it's time to make things right. Maybe it's time to fight for love, even if it feels impossible. And if you've been the one who's been hurt, remember that you are stronger than you think. You are capable of healing, of moving forward, and of opening your heart to the possibility of love again. But it starts with believing that you are worthy of love and forgiveness, and that sometimes even the most broken hearts can find their way back to happiness. So let us all take a lesson from Daniel and Ava. Let us embrace love, trust, and second chances. Let us be kind, patient, and understanding, not just with others, but with ourselves. And let us never forget that no matter how many mistakes we make, there is always hope for redemption. In the end, love isn't about never falling. It's about rising again, together. And that's what truly matters. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on the true power of love, trust, and redemption, then I invite you to be part of this incredible journey with me. This story of Daniel and Ava is just one of many, filled with raw emotions, powerful lessons, and the reminder that love can rise even after it has been broken. If you believe in second chances, in the beauty of redemption, and in the strength of human resilience, then please subscribe to my channel and be a part of this community. Together, we can explore more stories that dive deep into the complexities of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and the strength it takes to rebuild what was lost. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on more emotional stories like this one. Each video is carefully crafted to touch your heart, inspire you, and remind you that no matter what happens in life, there is always hope. If you've already been here before and loved the stories we've shared, thank you for being part of this journey. Your support means everything, and I promise that there are more powerful, moving, and unforgettable stories on the way. Together, we'll continue to grow and learn from these experiences, helping each other heal and inspire the world with love. So don't forget to press the bell icon so that you can be notified as soon as I release the next video. That way, you'll be the first to experience the next emotional roller coaster of love, heartbreak, and triumph. Your support, your comments, and your love keep me going, and I want to keep bringing you more stories that matter. Thank you for being here, thank you for your heart, and thank you for sharing this journey with me. If you love this story and the stories yet to come, hit that subscribe button now and join this amazing community. Together, we'll write the next chapter of love, healing, and hope.